Now that I'm over 50, there are certain things I find myself thinking about, things I don't always want to say out loud. And some of them make me stop and wonder, is it just me? Today I'm sharing 5 of those thoughts, and number 2 is probably the one I feel most uncomfortable talking about. Because I find that when I really pay attention to the thoughts that keep coming up for me and what might be behind them, I understand myself better. And sometimes what I discover isn't what I expected. Maybe as I share these with you, you'll find yourself looking at some of your own experiences a little differently. If we haven't met, I'm Dee Dee, and this is Follow Your Lighthouse, where I share my own experiences of navigating midlife, what I'm learning, what I'm still figuring out, and some of the things I think we don't talk about enough. Let's begin with the first one. Sometimes I feel lonely, and sometimes I really want to be alone. I've noticed that the older I get, the more I crave time by myself, and I really do mean crave it. I love the peace and quiet. I love knowing I don't have anywhere I need to be. I can decide what I want to do based entirely on what I feel like doing, or I can do absolutely nothing. There's something almost luxurious about having that kind of time. And I'm getting much better at enjoying it without immediately thinking I should be doing something else. And here's what I've come to learn. Wanting to be alone and feeling lonely aren't the same thing. When I want to be alone, I enjoy the time to myself. When I feel lonely, it feels completely different. I don't think I understood that nearly as well when I was younger. In my 30s and 40s, I was so active and on the go that I don't think I stopped long enough to even notice it or when I felt lonely. By the time I reached my 50s, I was paying much more attention to how I was feeling. The good thing is, I'm much better at noticing what I'm feeling without immediately deciding what it means or what I should do about it. If conversations like this resonate with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and join me here. Now, on to number 2. I want to embrace my aging body. But some days I really struggle with the changes I see and feel. This is probably the most uncomfortable one for me to talk about because I don't want it to sound as though I think getting older is a bad thing. I don't. Besides, I have no choice. But that doesn't mean I've been comfortable with all of the physical changes. I notice that I have more wrinkles. My shape has changed. Sometimes I'll see a picture of myself from years ago, and the difference in how I look can catch me by surprise. The same thing can happen when I look in the mirror, because inside I don't necessarily feel my age. Although I'm not really sure what feeling my age is supposed to feel like. Sometimes how I feel inside doesn't seem to match what I see on the outside, and I can have a hard time accepting how my appearance has changed over the years. Plus, a lot of the time, I feel self-conscious, and it's not only about how I look. My body reminds me that I'm getting older in ways I didn't notice when I was younger, and I think that's part of what I struggle with. I don't always feel as old as some of those reminders make me feel. I want to embrace getting older, but we also live in a society that puts so much emphasis on looking young, and I know I'm impacted by that. There's another part of this for me. I've been really hard on myself for how I looked for much of my life. There always seemed to be something I thought that needed to be different. I should be thinner. My shape should be different. If only I looked like this. If only I could change that. And what I'm realizing is that getting older hasn't made those thoughts disappear. I just have different things to be hard on myself about now. And that's what I'm trying to pay more attention to now. I want to feel more comfortable in my body. And as I said, I want to embrace it more, to have more respect for it. I want to appreciate everything it's done for me throughout my life. And truthfully, I find that difficult a lot of the time. I'd really like to be able to look at myself in the mirror without clothes on and not immediately start judging what I see. And even saying that out loud makes me really uncomfortable. But it's true. I'm much more aware of how quick I am to judge myself and I'm trying to have more self-compassion when those feelings come up. Because embracing my body as I get older doesn't have to mean loving every wrinkle or change in my shape. It means not using those changes as another reason to be hard on myself. And I'm still a work in progress. Now, on to number 3. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if some of the things I once thought I wanted had actually happened. I think most of us probably had some idea when we were younger of what we wanted our lives to look like. And every once in a while, I find myself wondering, what would my life have looked like if certain things had gone differently? I definitely appreciate the life I have, but I can appreciate my life and still wonder about the life I didn't have. And I think that's what I've been trying to understand. Can I let myself wonder about what might have been without turning it into regret? Because I'm realizing that wondering doesn't necessarily mean I wish I'd made different choices, but I wonder what would have happened if can quickly become maybe I should have. Why didn't I? If only I had. And before I know it, I'm questioning the choices I made. Why didn't I make different ones? And that's where I have to remind myself, I didn't know then what I know now. I made the choices I made based on who I was and what I knew at the time. But that doesn't mean I can't wish I'd done some things differently. I can, and there can be sadness around some of it, even regret. Strangely enough, there can even be relief when I look back at something I once wanted and realize I'm glad it didn't happen. I can appreciate the life I've had and still wish some things had been different. One doesn't have to cancel out the other. Where I have to pay attention is when regret starts to influence more than how I feel about the past, because it can affect how I see myself now, the choices I make, and the choices I make going forward. Because I can go from thinking, I wish I'd done that back then, and turn it into, there's another thing you didn't do. And that's when I'm no longer just looking back, I'm letting the past influence what I believe about myself now. And if you've ever found yourself wondering how your life might have been different, maybe you've noticed some of this too. Sometimes the wondering stays as wondering. Other times, it can start to affect how you see yourself and what's still possible for you. And that brings us to number 4. There are still things I want to do. But sometimes I wonder if I've waited too long. I think about this more now than I used to, and part of that has to do with age. Not because I think being over 50 makes me too old to start something new. I'm just more aware that I have more years behind me than I have in front of me. And I find myself wondering, do I have enough time? Will I have the energy to keep going? And if there's something I've wanted to do for years and it keeps coming back to me, at what point do I stop thinking about it and actually do something about it? I even think about this with Follow Your Lighthouse. I didn't spend years thinking I should start a YouTube channel, but over the years, I didn't think about different ways I could share some of what I'd learned and experienced in my life. For whatever reason, I never pursued them. And when I eventually decided to start Follow Your Lighthouse, it felt incredibly natural. I couldn't have created this version of Follow Your Lighthouse years ago. I didn't have the depth of self-awareness I have now. I hadn't lived some of the experiences I'm able to talk about now. And I don't think I could have had these conversations with you in the same way. So yes, part of me can wish I'd started sooner, but another part of me knows this was the right time for me to begin, and I don't believe I'm too late. I have more than one thing like that. Playing guitar is another example for me. I'm already a pretty good player, but I'd love to become really good. I've thought about finding a band to play with, or playing at a senior's home and bringing some joy to the residents. And here's something I've noticed about myself. Sometimes I can make the things I want to do bigger in my mind than they need to be. I'm not just thinking about playing guitar. I'm already imagining myself playing with a band or performing for other people. And when I do that, starting can feel like a much bigger commitment. One day I'll do that. One day I'll make time for that. And the longer I put it off, the easier it becomes to tell myself I've waited too long. So when I ask myself whether I've waited too long, I don't think age is always the only thing getting in my way. Sometimes I've spent so much time thinking about what something should become that I've made it harder to just do it. Perhaps there's something in your life you've wondered about too. Something you still want to do, but part of you wonders whether you've waited too long. I had an experience recently that made me see this differently. I joined a choir. I joined because I genuinely love the music they sing, soul, R&B, pop. I had gone to one of their performances before I joined, and I found the whole experience invigorating. I remember watching them and being able to picture myself out there performing with them because I love to sing. Then a friend of mine who was already in the choir invited me to join her. And I love the idea of being a part of a community of people who love to sing the same kind of music I do. So I joined. And eventually, I performed with them in public. It was glorious. I felt alive. My heart was full of joy. Now, I've since stepped away from the choir. I realized I didn't have the time I wanted to devote to continuing with it, and I'm okay with that. I don't look back and think the experience somehow didn't count because I didn't keep going. I did it. I experienced it. I loved it, and that was enough. And I have those memories now. I could have kept thinking one day I'd love to do that, but I didn't. I actually did it. And that's changed how I think about some of the other things I still want to do. Maybe I never become the guitarist I've imagined. Would that make playing any less worthwhile? I don't think it would, because that's what the choir showed me. I didn't have to keep doing it forever for the experience to have mattered. So the next time I catch myself wondering, have I waited too long? I also want to ask myself, am I making this bigger than it needs to be? Maybe I don't have to know exactly where something is going to lead before I do it. And maybe everything I start doesn't have to become something bigger to have been worth starting. That's something I want to remember when I think about the things I still want to do. Because when I think about getting older, I don't want to measure the time ahead of me only by what I haven't done yet. And that brings me to number 5. There are things about who I am now that I wouldn't trade to be younger again. I know myself differently now. I have a depth to me that could only have come from living my life. I don't have the same need to prove myself or be noticed like I did when I was younger. I'm more comfortable listening before I speak. I don't feel like I have to be the first person to say something. More and more, I trust that when I do speak, I have something of value to add. Do I always believe that? No, not all the time, but I recognize that quality in myself much more now. I've also become more thoughtful about how I respond to things. I spend more time figuring out what I'm actually feeling before I act on it. I'm more discerning, and best of all, I've come to trust myself more. Now, that doesn't mean the self-doubt and judgment have disappeared. Far from it. I still judge myself more than I wish I did, but I recognize it sooner when I'm doing it. I know that critical voice in my head much better now, and I'm getting better at catching myself before I automatically believe what it's telling me. One of the hardest things I've ever given myself has also been one of the greatest gifts, and that is permission to trust myself. And what I think of myself matters more to me now. I'm much better at saying no when something doesn't work for me and setting boundaries when I need to. I feel more connected to who I am than I did when I was younger. I can see and appreciate talents and gifts in myself that I didn't know how to recognize then. And maybe one of the simplest ways I can say it is, I'm liking myself more as I get older. And I think that's why when I consider what it would actually mean to be younger again, the answer isn't as obvious as it might seem. Would I enjoy having some of my younger physical self back? Of course. The energy, the stamina, fewer aches and pains. I'd take some of those back in a heartbeat. But if having them meant giving up what I know about myself now, or becoming the younger version of myself again, I wouldn't make that trade. And I think knowing myself better has also changed how I think about what I want in my life now. For so much of our lives, it seems like we're always being encouraged to want more. More to do, more to achieve, more to fit into our lives. But I'm starting to question whether getting more of what I want at this stage of my life always means adding something. Sometimes I may need to subtract something first. Making room for something I'm genuinely interested in may mean saying no to something else. And maybe I don't need to keep layering more and more into my life and then wonder why I don't have room for the things I say matter to me. I think that's part of trusting myself too, knowing I can decide what I want more of and what I want less of. That feels like freedom to me now. Not having everything figured out, just knowing myself better and trusting myself to decide what works for me. So yes, there are things about being younger that I miss. There are things about getting older that are difficult. But there are things about the woman I am now that I would not give back in exchange for being younger. And I wonder how many of us reach this stage of life and start recognizing things in ourselves that weren't there before. Or maybe were there, but we couldn't see them yet. Maybe that's another one of those things we don't say out loud often enough. These 5 things can sound like contradictions. I can feel lonely and want to be alone. I can struggle with my changing body and want to treat it with compassion. I can appreciate my life and wonder about the life I thought I'd have. I can wonder if I've waited too long and still be interested in what I might do next. And I can miss things about being younger without wanting to give up who I've become. Maybe I don't have to choose one side. Maybe both things can be true at the same time. And maybe some of these contradictions feel familiar to you as well. Which one of these 5 resonated the most with you? I'd love for you to share it in the comments. And as you read through what other women have shared, you may recognize some of your own experiences in theirs. I think that's why some of the things we rarely say out loud are the very things worth talking about. Sometimes it helps just to know we're not the only ones thinking or feeling this way. And those are the conversations I want us to keep having here. Until next time, keep turning towards your own light. Take good care, and I will see you in the next video.